This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by Maximus. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, avoiding the doom loop on the road to agency consolidation, the healthcare drive for efficiency and effectiveness, and building better buying power for the whole federal government. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. The new Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, writes her agency should prepare for a, quote, momentous final mission. President Trump has said he intends to eliminate the department after taking steps to close the U.S. Agency for International Development and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Chris Mihm is adjunct professor of public administration and international affairs at Syracuse University. He's former director of strategic issues at the Government Accountability Office. Loren DeJonge Schulman is founder and principal at Telos Lab. She's former associate director for performance at the Office of Management and Budget. Welcome, folks. Thanks for joining me. Chris, I start with you. And I take you back to GAO. One of my favorite GAO phrases, leading practices.
Yes, sir.
Are there leading practices for consolidating and closing agencies' capacity or the agencies themselves?
Yeah, fortunately, the answer to that is yes. And we, and not just GAO, but many other agencies and organizations as well, have done a lot of work on that. There's a couple of things that really come to the top, though, that are really absolutely essential on those. One is that successful efforts just don't view it as a downsizing or cutting staff or cutting cost. Rather, it's part of a larger package of reforms that organizations put in place if they want to actually increase effectiveness when all of this is over. So they make sure that they have the right institutional culture in place. That is a culture of informed risk, a culture in which organizations are actually using evidence to improve performance, and that individual line managers have the authority to act on the evidence that they find. So one of the key aspects of that is making sure that it's part of a larger package of reforms. A second thing that's also very important to that is that they understand that for most of the problems that government seeks to achieve, or address rather, especially at the federal level, it's going to be, the success of that is going to be organizations working across boundaries, whether it be agencies, whether it be state and local governments as well, whether it be across sectors on that. And so in many ways, it's managing the white space, as it were, across organizations that's going to lead to increased performance. And so successful change efforts understand that it's not just reforming your own individual organization, it's also looking at the partners and the delivery partners that are also going to be impacted by that. A third key area on that is engagement with your staff and your stakeholders. All too often what we find is that if communication exists, it's just one way, in a sense of the center telling the periphery, meaning the staff, this is what we're going to do, without really explaining how or why or what the ultimate goal is, or more important, not having active listening. That is hearing back from them about what they're doing. And then a fourth and absolutely vital one on this, and shout out to Loren and her colleagues at OMB, because when she was there, we really made progress on this, is making sure that you have a dedicated implementation team. All too often you have these big change initiatives that are announced, and then 6 months later we all wonder why did it crash and burn, or why did nothing come from this? Well, it's because we didn't have a dedicated implementation team like they did in permitting, like they did on personnel security clearances, on reductions of administrative burden, on the customer experience. That's making sure that you have people that set up how we're going to do this, making sure that you have the resources. If you can get those four key elements, you can downsize, you can right size, and you can also increase effectiveness when all of this is said and done.
One of the things that you and I talked about any number of times when you were on this show, both when you were in government and before you went back into OMB, was the fact that there were names attached to a lot of those things that you talked, especially when you would come on and talk about the president's management agenda, Loren. You had the stakeholder owners, names, faces, and so on, attached to each one of those things. What was the significance of that?
So Chris's point about having folks who are in charge viewing this as an implementation effort and not just something that is, we're trying to aim towards cuts, but that we're actually trying to aim towards a long-term goal. I think there's a couple of points on that are really critical. One is having somebody who is not just working towards how many dollars and people can I cut, but what is the outcome that I'm driving towards? How does this link to my public mission, the public assets that we've generated over the many years? Where are those going to go? Like, where is it we're going to take all of the incredible outcomes that we've built up over time, and what is the overall the direction, the landing space, the result that we're driving towards in that. The second, when it comes, the really important piece of this in terms of having an owner is the people part that you mentioned here, where we're talking about thousands of public servants who have signed up for a mission. They took an oath. They have been working on these issues for a long period of time. They may be asked to go do something different. They may be asked to leave their roles. They may not know the outcome of that. Having somebody who feels as though it is the responsibility to understand the culture, understand the impact on those individuals, and is taking responsibility for not only how they perform the duties now, but how they exit, is incredibly critical to the success of this, but also the long-term role of public service in the public sector. The other really key piece that you brought up that I think is so important is the white space, where federal missions don't just take place within the buildings that they work in. They touch implementers, they touch state and local governments, they touch data analysts, universities all around the country. Thinking through, as you're doing these consolidations, how is this going to impact that journey of the work, this stakeholder network that we've built over time? Who could take up some of these missions? Who could take up some of the data? Who might take up some of the individuals? How can we disperse some of the incredible public assets and public benefits we've developed over time so that they have a long-term impact, even if not necessarily within the bounds of Department of Education or USAID?
I didn't hear anything on that list of things that people should be considering that should be deal breakers, that should cause anybody to say, oh, well, that's going to be too hard, and so we shouldn't do it. So I don't hear anything that's holding anybody back from making some of the changes that people are talking about.
To me, I think one of the most critical things is the Trump administration and the leaders of these agencies are thinking through, how do I move my agency in a new direction, consolidate, and the role here is to recognize that these are public organizations, public employees, public missions, public benefits that the American people have invested in over the past however many decades. And to see those not only as something that they need to put into cold storage, but to understand the benefit of and where it goes over the future, to me, that's not even just like not a deal breaker. It's something that should be an obligation for the oath that we're taking as public servants. And there's no law, there's no resource limitations. This should be a natural part of consolidation and looking into the future for these teams.
One of the things that you've talked about all the time too, to me, Chris, is outcomes and making sure that outcomes, mission delivery, is kind of the gold standard. What is the biggest challenge in preserving the mission delivery at the same time one is doing whatever consolidation or movement that one is doing?
Well, I think there are two big challenges, actually. One is just being very clear about the outcomes that you want to achieve, and outcomes in the sense of demonstrable results and impact on behalf of the American people, not just kind of processes or this is how often we did something, an output or something, but really making sure that we're focusing on those outcomes, articulating those, how are we going to measure those. That's all what the legislation of GPRA and GPRA modernization, all this stuff that's so close to my heart was about, but making sure that we have that. The second, and I think actually, the vital element on that is then linking very carefully what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And this is where it becomes so important that we just don't willy-nilly or just go in and slash data analytics units or evidence units or program evaluation. We need to understand what is the relationship between our daily activities and the outcomes that we're seeking to achieve. If we can get those clarity on goals and then also understanding those relationships, we're going to be in a pretty good space.
The last thing I would add on top of that is to make sure that we're being as clear and transparent to the American people as possible. Yep. So when a program is going to change, when it's going to go in a different direction, when it's going to go away, to talk about not only where we have been, where it's going to go, but also the likely impact on their day-to-day, how they may receive benefits, how they may get information, who they should turn to instead. These are very doable actions that the current administration can take in order to effectively transition the work that they want to do.
What's the why there? Why is it important for that to happen?
So many Americans only hear about where change is going to happen in government or challenges with government. They don't often hear, what does government do every day? How does this actually affect them day to day? And that may not be relevant on a regular basis, but when you're fundamentally changing overall aid programs or Department of Education research programs or otherwise, this may have immediate effects or longer term effects. And again, coming back to that public assets, public benefits, public resources, we can tell the American people, here's what we were doing before, we're going to do it differently, and here's why, and here's how you might experience it, so that they have a good understanding of not only why things are changing, but where it's going to go over time.
And part of that, if I could just jump in for a moment, is I think part of it is, and this is this is all the great work that Loren did when she was in government, is focusing on the customer experience, is understanding what is the impact of all of these programs when it actually gets down to the individual taxpayer, the individual program recipient, how they are going to experience the government, and as Loren was pointing out, how that will change, and making sure that we're clear about that, we're talking to people about that, and we're measuring that performance. We're measuring not just their satisfaction, but how are we doing in helping the individuals, the clients, the customers achieve what they want to achieve with why they came to government or why they came to a government service.
And that shouldn't be something that's open to tremendous debate, because it wasn't just your PMA that included a customer experience element. The first Trump administration's PMA also included changing the way that citizens experience the government.
There was a tremendous amount of work in the Trump administration, particularly at the VA, the Veterans Administration, that looked at the journey of veterans as they go through receiving medical benefits or otherwise. And so many of those tactics that they applied and learned there, we spread across the rest of government, and could be actually quite applicable to the conversations we're having right now. How do these changes impact the regular citizen as they are crossing a border, as they're flying, as they are getting veterans benefits, as they are applying for student aid? How does the change impact them as they are going to click that button or fill out that form?
And Francis, as we know, the first set of customer service standards goes back to the National Performance Review in the Clinton administration. And in fact, in many ways, that model has endured, focusing on the high impact service providers or high impact agencies, those agencies that have over 95% of citizen interactions with the federal government. If we can get that right, if we can change and improve those sets of relationships, we can probably have knock-on effects overall on how people have trust in government. And so this is, again, why the work that Loren and her team were doing was so important.
All right, go ahead.
One of the things I have, I guess, appreciated about how the current administration is approaching is recognizing that they may pursue things that they have to reverse and make mistakes. And I think that allowing for some of that reversibility as they learn about how these changes are going to impact Americans, as they see how they may have long-term changes that may not, be as understandable today, if they can build in some of the documentation, keep things alive, keep it documented, so that if you do need to go back and reverse it, it's possible to do. That will be a huge gift to all of their successors as well.
And it can be audited.
And that's what's really important.
That's the real reason we want
that's what's really important.
There's a lot more I'd love to cover, but we're out of time. Loren, Chris, it's wonderful to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
You can read more about closing and consolidating agencies on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the healthcare drive for efficiency and effectiveness. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in just a moment.
But the Navy's going to have very unique requirements that we just don't see on the commercial side, like working with acoustic sonar data is not something that many commercial enterprises are involved in. And so being planned to partner across a broader, diverse set of companies, both software providers and contractors who can do the dev work, is really important.
I think the first thing that we're seeing is agencies and leaders determining how to balance speed and responsibility in adopting generative AI. And so as a part of that, they look at the way to leverage this technology in a secure cloud environment through accredited services, and to use models that they can rely on from a trust and safety standpoint and a reliability and performance standpoint.
Welcome back. The Department of Veterans Affairs is pressing the go button on the expansion of its electronic health record rollout. 9 more facilities will go live with the system by next year in an attempt to drive efficiency and effectiveness throughout the system. Monica Rosser is Executive Managing Director for Federal Health at Maximus. Monica, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What are the important components of a rollout like that? What are the pieces agencies should have in place when they're going to make a big change?
Absolutely. Looking at the Oracle Cerner rollout, it's really the action after the insights. So this large-scale modernization effort, having those clinical champions at the table initially, setting forth those key requirements, and then a real repeatable metrics-based, value-based centered care performance of how this is going to happen. It's that continuum of metrics, outcomes, and constant redetermination of, are we pulling in the right data? Are the performance metrics where it needs to be? And that continual conversations with the user community.
The two big pieces of the general discussion around information technology and government are applicable here too, aren't they? Artificial intelligence
Absolutely.
and data, right?
You can't talk about modernization in this current ecosystem without talking about the influx of AI, machine learning, robotic process automation. Those are the key topics right now. But also having that match up with the key user requirements, because that is, we could be bringing forth all of the latest and greatest in the tools and technologies, but understanding how that is affecting the clinical provisioning, what that looks for benefits delivery. Though, again, the insights into action is the real cornerstone of the implementation of the new emerging techs with AI and ML and RPA.
In the last part of this program, talking to Chris and Loren about customer experience,
Absolutely.
I jotted down human-centered design, and I wonder if in the healthcare space a better term might not be human-centered approach, because it's not just designing the software. When I go to get care somewhere, I'm not using software, hopefully I'm talking to someone, but that person's probably using software.
Absolutely. The total experience picture, we've talked about, CX in action, customer experience in action, but it's the total holistic view of health benefits delivery, using HCD throughout that entire process, from journey mapping, understanding that the baseline of metrics delivery, that is the key component for human-centered design through all of the care continuum and benefit delivery aspects.
And as Loren said, the VA has done a good job with understanding human-centered design in the context of that customer journey.
We were founding member of the Veteran Experience Office. That has been a fundamental shift in process mapping, the journey, having that understand that it is not only the veteran but beneficiary experience as well. Having all of the insight, requirements, action to being able to feed into the next level of the IT modernization effort, HCD has to be at the forefront of how we're looking at that total experience.
All right, before we went on the air, you told me there is a federal health challenge that you think is not getting enough attention, and you want to shout it out. What is that?
Well, so personally, I've just gone through this experience with the caregiver community. We do wonderful work with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. There is over 14 million military and veteran caregivers in this country right now. We are at the crux of a silver tsunami. 10,000 citizens are turning 65 and older. I believe that this is efficiency and effectiveness. This is a key component of it. Not if this is going to happen, this is a when. So having that look at holistic care, the entire community, I just believe that this is one of those things in the federal health, where if we're talking about interoperability and we're talking about agency consolidation with data exchange and things like that, this is something that needs to be at the forefront of that conversation of efficiency and effectiveness.
We have about 30 seconds left. Who needs to do what to achieve the vision that you have for that sector?
We need to really be leaning in, not only on data insights, but on interoperability. These are not spontaneous cases. These are folks that are drawing from care and benefits from across the federal health purview. We'll need to have champions with the new Elizabeth Dole Act, but this is something that is going to take all of us in the federal health space to come together from a consolidation perspective and really put this as a cause, because this is happening.
Monica, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining
Francis,
me today.
thank you so much.
You can read more about driving efficiency and effectiveness in federal healthcare systems on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, building better buying power for the whole federal government. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back. Zero Trust is the foundation of cybersecurity across government. You'll learn what it takes to put it into action on Zero Trust in depth. You'll meet leaders from DISA, the State Department, the Government Accountability Office, and Booz Allen talking about the challenges and solutions shaping Zero Trust today. Don't miss this special program sponsored by Booz Allen, Tuesday, March 18th at 8:30 p.m. on WJLA 24/7 News, or stream it anytime at fedgovtoday.com. Welcome back. The Department of Government Efficiency says the government buys thousands more software licenses at some agencies than there are employees to use them. Congress took aim at the software problem last year when the House passed the Strengthening Agency Management and Oversight of Software Assets Act. Joe Jordan is CEO of Actaparo and former administrator of federal procurement policy at the Office of Management and Budget. Joe, welcome. Thanks for joining me. As somebody who's been paying attention to this for a long time, why has it been so hard to get agencies on board with the idea of buying as an enterprise?
Yeah, Francis, and thanks for having me. There are a few reasons. One, agencies will argue they need slightly different configurations, and maybe their agency pluses up or subtracts seasonal employees or things like that. Of course, the real reason is the kind of human behavior in DC, where if you give up any of your budget, you never get it back. So they will justify it by saying, yes, but there's a small price to pay to turn it back on and go through another contracting process. But those aren't good reasons. Those aren't good excuses. As you noted, we addressed some of this when I was at OMB through the Federal Strategic Sourcing Initiative. My friend Ann Rung, and of course Leslie Field through all this, and Matthew Blum helped lead category management. That was kind of an improvement on that going forward. And I think this is a great bipartisan area to try to capture some federal efficiencies.
What are the key steps to take that maybe are not happening now in order to be able to get somebody's arms around this issue?
Well, I think one, an enterprise-wide, and meaning government-wide. You had several guests on recently, Maria Rote and Dave Pounder, who talked about this enterprise-wide approach for the whole government on categories like this in information technology. I think that's really smart, and hopefully the team at DOGE that's collecting all this data can do that. Then you need kind of a really senior authority to care. So in my case, my boss, Jeff Zients, and Sylvia Burwell at OMB cared, and they control, to some extent, the purse strings. And so that made agencies care. But now the president and Mr. Musk seem to care quite a bit about efficiencies. And so this is, that will lend that power and impact and importance to the effort. And then third, and this is the part where both sides we fall apart sometimes, is you need to show agencies, when you need more of these licenses than expected, we will allow you to go get those. Not just right now you don't and we're taking them away, never to be returned again. And so really it's that smart approach to things like enterprise software that could have a big impact.
One of the conversations that's going on around town, Bloomberg reported this week that the Trump administration may start driving all purchasing for the government through the General Services Administration. Is that a potential stick to the carrot that agencies have had in the past to do things in a different way?
It sure is, and especially if it's done in a believable way where they're not simultaneously announcing a 50% reduction to the Federal Acquisition Service workforce who would carry out that purchasing. But absolutely, that can be a way to do it, because without a shared understanding of the requirements and then the importance of coming together in a unified solution, it's not going to happen. And that could be a way to, add some stick to the equation.
You talked about some of the reasons why agencies shouldn't go out on their own and do individual things. What are some of the arguments that you've seen that are convincing about why agencies should go it alone on a particular type of procurement?
Sure. So let me break kind of these software procurements into almost three buckets. One, the shared services, payroll, financial management systems that are very similar across the entire government, where I really like the outsourced shared services model to a centralized purchaser of the software that would run that. Then you've got things that are commodity type software that every agency's buying, your Microsoft licenses, etc., which in many cases can be negotiated government-wide, but man, that's hard. Neither side loves giving up that control. And then third are things that are more mission-specific. So agencies may have similar but not perfectly overlapping missions, and that's where it gets a little murky. Like acquisition systems, contract writing systems. Hey, can't more agencies use the same one? I would argue yes. But they have credibly argued back at times, no, here's why our needs are different, and getting one system that can meet all of our needs will actually be more expensive. So again, all discussions that could be better informed by data.
One issue that GSA has struggled with is that data over time, to be able to assemble it and make it available to people at other agencies to know agency X paid $5 for this, agency Y paid $6 for this, and we want to understand what the differences are and why that happens. What would you like to see happen in order for that visibility to be available to people all across government?
Thank you for teeing me up for one of my absolute favorite topics, which is the absence of what nerds like me call level 3 data. So that line item pricing data is not usually required or visible in federal contracts. Vendors will argue, come on, that's, a trade secret, I can't have that published. Agencies will say, well, it's really hard. We bought a bundle of things. We bought peripherals with this hardware and software all at once. But I would love to move in the direction where there's more clarity. If it just is intra-government, I can live with that. There's no reason it can't be public. California has great pricing data that I often use with my clients to figure out what they should price their federal offerings at. So I would disagree that it can't be done, and I'd love a push there to improve that pricing transparency.
We have less than a minute left. Mechanically, what would have to happen that isn't happening now? Because like I said, GSA has tried to do this for a long time and just seemingly has not been able to wrap its arms around the issue.
Yeah, it's a will issue, not a technology, legislation, regulation issue. So agencies would have to write that as a requirement into their contracts, and vendors could then have the choice not to bid on those. I think given the current environment and some of the things we talked about at the top, they're probably less likely to push back in an extreme way as they have been in the past, but that's really what it would come down to. And to be clear, I want this done in a collaborative way. These government contractors are usually very mission-oriented, great folks in businesses, and so are the people on the agency side, but collaboratively they can get there.
Joe, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Francis.
You can read more about everything Joe talked about on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in just a moment.
Because where we are right now in Gen AI and software development, it's really about code assistance. It's about human in the loop, which I think is really valuable to your first question around compliance and security. So humans always involved, but what we want to do is we want to improve that for the future.
Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, cybersecurity leaders from DISA, the State Department, the Government Accountability Office, and Booz Allen will tell you how they're implementing their agency's Zero Trust frameworks on Zero Trust In Depth, sponsored by Booz Allen. The show airs this Tuesday night, March 18th at 8:30 p.m. on WJLA 24/7 News. If you missed the show on the air, you can watch it anytime after it's on TV, on demand at fedgovtoday.com and the Fed Gov Today YouTube channel. Fed Gov Today TV returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with a deep dive on identity management for cybersecurity. Brian Herman of DISA will be here. I hope you will be too. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.